Hello, everybody, and thank you for joining the OMA presented Return to Work and the Human Experience with John Burton. And John is a senior director with Pacific Project Management. He is going to do his best to enlighten us onto what's been going on when it comes to the return to office, sort of what's been happening the last couple weeks, what he sees happening now, and then hopefully, John, you can get out a crystal ball and tell us exactly how this is all going to shake out. I'd really appreciate that. So, John, if you wouldn't mind, take a couple minutes, give us a little background on yourself, please do.
Absolutely. And if I had that crystal ball, I'd probably be doing the Mega Millions numbers first. So anyways, appreciate it, Mike. Good morning, everyone. As Mike said, my name is John Burton. I am a senior director with Pacific Project Management. We do real estate consulting from consulting, construction project management, and transition and relocation management. I am on the relocation side. So we've been seeing a lot of different things, and I'll try to kind of talk about the things we're seeing across our practice and across the country with our clients. The original push was a lot of people rushing to get PPE, N95 masks, goggles, gloves. That seemed to be the big thing about what are we going to do, disinfectant, hand sanitizers. That kind of got its rhythm, and then people started looking at procedures. How are we going to come back to the office? What do we need to do? What are our policies? That kind of morphed into signage type things. What are we going to do? How many people are we going to leave in an elevator? 6-foot spacing, directional signs, removing chairs or taping off chairs or desks or workstations, trying to get the workplace ready. I think if some of you heard my previous podcast with OMAs, we talked about operational readiness. They're getting their facility ready for the employees to come back. The next phase right now that we're in, that we're seeing, is two major things to think about. One is the commute. If you look at areas like New York, Seattle, cities that people typically take public transportation, it's either not available or people don't feel that it's safe enough to come use public transportation to come to work. And in those areas, a lot of people don't own cars. So companies are looking at how do they do that? How, even with a reduced number of people coming into the office, it still is an issue they have to deal with. And secondly, and again, more on the human side, is dependent care. Schools are out, daycare centers aren't in, summer camps aren't going to be in place. So wrestling or weighing the options both with commute and dependent care make it difficult for the employees even to come back to the work environment. It's ready, we're ready to come back. And then lastly, a lot of what we're seeing is companies are tapping the brakes a bit. Some people went full force, put up plexiglass dividers, did a lot of different things. And a lot of companies are saying, hold on, we're not sure how this is all going to work, a lot because of the issues we've already discussed. And they're really focusing a lot on how many of these people can we keep at home for a longer period, and how do we make them more efficient at home and more comfortable at home, and set up some sort of social environment for them to replace what they would have in the office, whether they be, virtual happy hours or meeting in small groups at an offsite location. I think you're going to see more people staying home longer than initially anticipated. Although they could go back to the office, I think people are staying on the side of caution and staying back a bit.
Well, John, you covered a lot in there. I'm going to insist that we're gonna dig a lot deeper on a lot of those things. Sure. First off, why don't we talk a little bit about what's really top of mind to a lot of people that might be on this webcast right now. Let's go deeper into let's just talk now about elevators, because there actually was a question by one of the attendees on elevators. We're going to go elevators, removal of furniture, and signage. Can we just talk a little bit? Can we go a little bit deeper what you're seeing in the marketplace? Let's start with elevators. What are we seeing people doing when it comes to the elevators in the shared spaces?
Well, it's interesting because, obviously elevators are a very confined space. And for example, what you're going to see on a fairly good sized elevator is they'll put 4 circles, one in each corner, and people go in and stand there. And if the elevator opens and there's not an available circle, you don't get on. So, if you couple that, and I'll throw something else in because it kind of goes with the elevator. If people are taking temperatures as people come into the building, they're queued up to have their temperature taking, and then they're queued up for the elevator. So one of the things companies are looking at is how long is it going to take our employees to get into the building? Again, going back to, is it more efficient for them to work from home instead of waiting 2 hours in line to get into the building to go to the 20th floor? What we've also discussed and seen is for, floors 3, 4, 5, or not so far up, maybe doing a challenge, like how many steps you get in, and teams can, take the stairs and do a Fitbit challenge or an Apple Watch challenge or whatever you want to do, and make it a competitive thing and a team game. Or, okay, our team uses the stairs, and maybe that's one way of making a little bit of fun and kind of mitigating the effect of the elevator.
Okay. Are you seeing that, John? Is it more in some states than others where they're doing the temp check and the elevator in the common space? Is that something that you're seeing or involved with right now?
Most of it's our clients. We're not conducting it. We're helping them plan it, orchestrate it, doing some analysis again on what it's going to be like to get people up to the spaces. But there are a lot of companies coming up and setting up specialized small internal tents and things like that so people can have this done in private, right? So they're not out in the open. I think it's a whole big something very new that people are going to have to adjust to, and the legalities of it all. And you hear people talking about, is it a HIPAA violation or not? And people say, well, the state of the pandemic, the president's decree, and the state of emergency, we can get around some of those things. So again, it's new grounds, and everybody really has to be careful and check with their own legal departments on, what they need to do to make the workplace safe for people to come back to.
Well, we're going to leave that to the American Medical Association and the ACLU webcast we're doing later today. We'll let them deal with the HIPAA stuff. That seems like a giant ball of twine. All right, so as we move on from elevators, let's go into signage. I mean, what you kind of touched on a little bit about putting the sort of like the stand here in the elevator. Take us up into the workspace. What are we seeing now that we've gotten onto the floor? We're into the workspace. What's happening next?
Peggy, it looks like Peggy just joined. If she can unmute, Peggy's done a tremendous amount of work with signage and that sort of thing with her firm up in Wisconsin. Peggy, you want to take a stab at that one?
Sure. Gentlemen, could you repeat? I've been having technical difficulties, so my apologies. I've been on my screen and trying to. So John, please repeat that for me.
Yeah, Mike had asked the question about, what we are seeing for signage. We talked about already, stand here in an elevator, but your firm has done some tremendous things with providing signage for your clients. And what I said was, since you're doing it firsthand, it may be a good thing for you to talk about the signs that you've been able to install or provide to your client base.
Sure.
And John, let me just kind of clarify. So we've already gone from the common workspace, we've entered the building, we've gotten on the elevator, we've come up to the floor. So now you're on your floor, and we want to talk about the experience, the employee experience, now that they're leaving the elevator, they're coming into the elevator bay, before they even get to their workspace. What is that signage starting to look like, Peggy?
Well, it should start with some demarcations about how to travel to that workspace. This really depends on, the size of the building, the size of the floor, and how many employees are going to be called back to work in phase 1, or how many phases they've delineated that they're going to have. So what we're asking companies to do is to take a very simplistic, pragmatic approach and, walk their own space and determine from the elevator how many people they would like in any type of designated rooms. But what they're going to see when they get off that elevator is immediately the traffic flow pattern, so that there are demarcations on the floor, or there are freestanding pedestal signs which tell them which way they should be going. In common areas with you have wider hallways with two-way traffic, you kind of want to delineate that it's like a road and you're going one way on the right side and this way on the left. You want to eliminate people passing each other as much as possible. And then when you get into a lack of a better term, a cube farm, you want to have that one-way circular traffic going through it so that there's only one way in and one way out. And what we're seeing is that companies are designating signage at the beginning of that entrance to say, not allowed if you don't have a office in this space. So they don't want people coming visiting into that cubicle area. It's just for you to enter and to exit, all going in one way. And the signage is very simplistic. Taking a small conference room, saying if you're going to allow one or two, a larger conference room, 4 to 6 if it normally could seat 8 to 12. So people are just applying pragmatic common sense where they logically can walk in and space people apart by that 6-foot distancing. And sometimes they are removing the furniture from the room so that's as well dictating without the signage that, hey, there's only 6 people allowed in here. Maybe before we could get 12, but there's only 6 chairs today.
Well, that helps. That takes us right into those 2 other spaces. And Peggy, I'd love for you to kind of touch in on this, into the collaborative space and sort of cafe spaces on the floor. What's happening there? You touched on conference as far as like de-densifying those conference spaces. What's happening in the general open collaborative and cafe spaces?
Sure, they're moving the tables. They're removing them physically from the room. Some aren't even allowing people to sit in a cafeteria at all. They want them to take it back to their desk space and eat. They're talking about the food. They're having packaged food to go. They're removing the coffee and the coffee stirrers, because how do you grab one without contaminating the rest? So it's getting down to the minutia with all of that. If they are allowing people to sit, it's 1 person at a table and maybe 2 at a very, very long table. I can tell you gyms are mostly getting shut down. Most people aren't opening their club areas or their workout areas unless they're quite expansive and they can have designated people into a quadrant of that area and keep them localized there. So they're going back. We're finding with the corporations that we're working with that companies have really tapped the brakes. They're not in a rush and they are thinking this through, and they're going back with a pretty small percentage of employees for first phase. And they're thinking it out, and they want to see how these bottlenecks are really going to function. And how they do with a very small percentage of their employees, and see how this goes. I think with the opening up of everything, we've flattened the curve in so many areas of the country, but we're kind of going back into what Sweden started out with. Corporations are saying to us, we really want to see what the next 30, 60 days brings around the country and what happens before we get ourselves into that position of maybe not having something work out so well. So they're very cautious. I would say that would be the majority that at least we're working with. That is our little experiment that we've got that we can see and get tactical with. But we also have companies that are allowing more than 50%. That's rare. And those that are allowing 50% are doing it in phases where, team A and team B, team A will come in and work for a week, then team B, or maybe it's a 2-week intervals.
Okay. Let's get into hey, Peggy, I want you to go a little bit deeper. You talked about it a little bit when you got into stirrers, and probably a topic that's very important to a lot of employees is coffee. How are we going to, is this the end of the Keurig machine, or what? How are we going to get coffee to these people? And it sounds tongue in cheek, but if anybody likes their caffeine as much as I do, they know how important this is to people. So what are we going to do about coffee stations? Are they just shut down?
A lot of them are. And if anything, they're going to be having somebody else administered and handing it to you. And I think you're going to see a lot of thermoses of coffee filled coming to the office and people carrying their own coffee.
That's it. You know what? I think that's a great thing. Go fill up your thermos at Starbucks before you come to the office. I think that might be something that we see a little bit more. So I'm going to go to, we've covered all the way through wayfinding. I want to touch on both you guys. If you could help us understand, because there's a lot of people that are on here right now that might touch Class A, Class B, and industrial. Are you seeing a difference across the board in those different classes of space on how the employers are reacting to the return to work? I'll start with you, John.
You know, it's interesting. We'll start with industrial. I mean, industrial, a lot of those folks were deemed necessary and worked through this, but they're instituting changes where their people are wearing PPE. A lot of things are will call. You can't go into the buildings. So that type of space, you know, let's call it the warehouse space, has continued to function with some modifications. You look at other spaces such as manufacturing and things like that, slowly that's coming back. But again, if you look at, for example, you know, Tesla out in California, they went in prior to their authorization to do so, but they're putting barriers in between people on an assembly-like type of environment. I think the biggest difference you're going to see between Class A and Class B buildings, for example, a lot here in the Metro DC area, a lot of the buildings in DC itself are older. So their air handling systems aren't designed to bring in fresh air from the outside, so it's recirculating the same air. So they have different challenges. And when we, you know, sit in our networking groups, we talk about from all different perspectives. They're going to have a different challenge in a Class A building that's able to recirculate air and have different things to think about before their employees come back.
Peggy, do you want to jump in on that? Are you seeing a difference between the different types of workspaces?
No, I think John nailed it. That is exactly what we're seeing. The difference between the Class A and B is probably only the air circulation. Other than that, they've got some of the same issues. It really is the size of the space, the amount of people that have to get up into that building, and the bottlenecks from the first floor and dispensing those people throughout the facility. So, you know, companies are looking at, they may have had one point of entry originally for security purposes, but the building may have 4 or 5. They have backdoor entrances, they have side entrances that might be for different types of vendors that, you know, attend to the facility. Well, they're opening those up and creating additional security points so that we have greater points of entrance into the facility, and then staggering people's work times for when they should enter that facility so that they can get them up onto their floors appropriately and safely, and not have everybody standing in the lobby now waiting because of having 10 people in an elevator. They'll only allow 4.
You know, one of the things, if I could just piggyback on that a little bit more, that I think we will see, and again, from the conversations that, you know, Peggy and I have been having with our clients, as well as other folks, whatever it looks like on day 1 is probably not going to be what it looks like on day 10 or day 20. Because as you get in and use the space and figure out, you know, do we have this approach correct, you're going to see changes to it, I think, quite frequently and quite dramatically, as people figure that, you know, this sounded good on paper, but they're going to need to pivot and change quickly. So it looks like, or it is a seamless transition to the new approach. And I think that's important for all of us that are on this call to think about, is how quickly can we pivot and support change?
That's really good. That's really good. Thanks, guys. All right, the next part I wanted to go into, because we want to be respectful of everybody's time here. Let's get into, we want to talk about the human experience a little bit, but like, what are y'all seeing as far as outreach to the staff? I've actually been reached out to sort of to give my opinion on comfort level of returning to the office. What are y'all seeing as far as surveys, telephone outreach, digital? What are companies doing to get the opinion of their employees?
Well, I can jump into that. We've had many customers that are finding that their employees are enjoying working from home, and they'd like to continue that process. Maybe not forever, but they're fine right now. And I don't know if that's the employers themselves don't know if that's a permanent condition or simply because they may have fear and trepidation even coming back to work, a little bit of both. What I can tell you is that it is all across the board, and you have the human element is so important that it has to be weighed and put into this. As I think as employers, as leaders, we have a responsibility to take care of our employees. They have to, if we're paying them to work, they have to be safe. They have to feel comfortable. So when they walk in and you're welcoming them back, you really want them to see that care and attention has been made within that facility if they are going to come back, whether it's 2 days a week or 1 day a week. That still needs to be there. And all these people are bringing their I hate to get into it, but their political beliefs, their human beliefs, their fears and trepidations, or their attitude that they feel they're okay and they don't feel afraid of the virus at all. And I just really want to emphasize how important it is that we all need to respect where everyone is coming from on this element. And then you need to flip over that as a leader, you need to cater to all of that. So you're going to have some people come back to work who really don't care about the signage. They're going to be marching through and they feel like they're Teflon. And then other people are going to really feel thank you for putting that up. And thank you for the guy or the woman who feels like they're Teflon. At least you've given them a rule that they need to adhere by so that I feel safe from, the person who just wants to go anywhere or do anything. So those are the things that we have to weigh in the human element that I find is very, very difficult. And as we're talking with leaders and teams of people to figure out how to get this right, that's what they're struggling with a little bit. And I think just to get to that starting point to figure out the egress and egress and the demarcations and come back slowly and measured with a percentage of people is the right thing. And to John's point, modify as you go.
That's a good point. All right, that brings us to the question that each of you guys get to answer. It's a pretty tough one. It's from Pat O'Brien with 3MD Relocation. Pat says, how long do you see the quote new normal lasting? John, I'll let you answer that one. If you can.
Crystal ball. There we go.
Without getting political, if you could just go ahead and answer that one. How long do you see the new normal lasting?
So I think if people are smart, right? And I think the big question is, what is the new normal, right? Is the new normal 20% staggered, or is the new normal we wash our hands more and are more respectful of people's spaces, right? So I think the new normal is a moving target. I think if you take that and say, when are we going to go back to where we were 6 months ago? We've had this conversation before. I call it BC, 6 months BC before COVID. I think it's going to be probably towards the end of 2021 before people are comfortable. We know if this comes back, we get it through a flu season, a vaccine is in place, and it's tested and tried. I think it's going to have steps all the way through, but we'll be at 10%, 15%, 20%. I mean, there was a NASCAR race yesterday with no one in the stands, right? At some point, they're going to let half the people in. So I think it's 2021 towards a Q3, Q4 before we go back to where we were 6 months ago, with some modifications that should have probably been put in place a long time ago because we just got careless and sloppy. People shouldn't have to be told to wash your hands as an adult.
Oh, that's a good one. Peggy, you want to answer that one?
Yeah, I think John is spot on. Until we really have a vaccine, and that's going to take quite some time to be developed and manufactured and administered to the entire population, that people aren't going to be flying for business, traveling like they once were, and that these webinars are going to be very, very popular for a long time. And we do have the flip side, though, and that is, I have a portion of my own staff that are dying to see each other and to get back to the normal. And as a office mover and furniture dealership, we have spent the last 8 years creating collaborative spaces and all these wonderful, wonderful, cool places to bring people together, which these environments completely fly in the face of what we're doing today. And yet that is the human nature that we all want. We want that back. And, so I think, I believe that as soon as this thing is lifted, it's just like, when can we go to a concert? When can we go and, whether it's your church or get together and have a backyard barbecue and everybody hug each other? I think we're all dying for that, because that's who we are as human beings. So I think as soon as this is listed, this may be a footnote, and we're going to be all, back to the way we were BC, 10 weeks ago. That's what I feel. I think the bounce back, once the vaccine is not or the virus is not in our midst the way it is today, I think that return to normal is going to go real quick.
Well, thanks, guys.
Mike, let me jump in there real quick. I think this is really important for a lot of folks that are on this call. With these changes lies tremendous opportunity. Just as the challenges that were not there 2, 3, 4, whatever ago, the opportunities are also there to provide new and different services. If you folks haven't seen it, go to Peggy's website at Coakley Brothers. They've done tremendous things with signage and plexiglass dividers that a mover never would have been involved with a few months ago. So you have to look at that side of it as well, as what else can we be doing to support something that's a brand new thing. Peggy mentioned they've been working on collaborative spaces. 10 years ago, when people had their 6-foot cubes, they would have laughed at you.
That's so true.
What's collaboration and who really cares, right? But now we want to hear. I mean, that's the thing that I'm dying to hear. But we've worked so hard to, really create environments for people to want to share their great ideas. As a creative, I can't wait till that comes back. So here's a last question for both you guys. Again, it's the last question of the day, but I want you to share like one little tidbit that you can give that would just kind of like a best practice. I'm not asking for you to not get out a crystal ball. It is May the 18th of 2020, right? On May the 18th, if someone was trying to come back and have a plan based on the information they have today, what would you like to share with them as far as a best practice for opening up their space now over the course of the next few weeks? John, I'm going to start with you. If you're giving someone advice today for best practices just for the next few weeks, what would you like to share with them?
I think that's a two-pronged answer. So the first one is your employees. Peggy touched on this. The mental psyche. We have at PPM 2 calls a day, one in the morning with leadership and one in the afternoon. That's an open call to anyone who wants to jump on to discuss the issues important to return to office and COVID. Gives them the opportunity to tell us what they're concerned with. So the first one is the employee attitude or where their mindset is. Doesn't matter what your space looks like if they're not ready, able, or in the right mindset. A lot of insurance companies are allowing for more counseling and things like that. So making sure your employees understand what's available to them and listening to them, because perceptions are realities. And secondly, a lot of it's common sense. Wash your hands, keep the distance, be smart about it. And those are the two things I think that are going to make this go a lot smoother.
Thanks, John. That's great advice. Peggy.
Yeah, mine is keep it simple. Don't overthink it, and start with common sense on what you would do for social distancing, just like they're doing in the grocery stores that you've seen everywhere. So, It is. Wash your hands, stay 6 feet away, and wear a mask when you get up from your cube or your desk. And perhaps not bring everybody back at once so that you can understand and modify as you go. And, you know, just keep with the basics, and I think everybody's going to stay safe. I think we're going to be fine.
Well, thank you so much. And then last bit, John and Peggy. John, if anybody wanted to ask you a question or a follow-up, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Best way is drop me an email, and I'll say it slowly. It's John, John, Burton, Burton, at Pacific, P as in Peter, M as in Mary, G as in George, .com, pacificpmg.com. Or you can hit me up on LinkedIn as well.
That's great. Hey, Peggy, what would be the best way if someone had a follow-up question for you? How would they get in touch with you?
Sure, email would be best, and mine is Coakley at CoakleyBrothers.com, Coakley, and Brothers is fully spelled out.
All right, that's great. Again, thank you so much. And to anyone listening, this will be a continuing thing presented to you by the Office Moving Alliance, or OMA. And thank you so much for checking in, and we look forward to seeing y'all soon. Thanks, bye.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.